Oh wow, I didn't know that this would work. Um, Let me see if it is really working. Yes, it is working. It is working. Wow. What about the other one? I should actually just tell you my news on this one instead of starting another stream. So some of you will know that I have received a rather disappointing email from YouTube telling me that my account will be deleted, even though um, even though the reason for my deletion technically should be rescinded because YouTube has said it will be okay to talk about the stolen election of 2020. And since my last few strikes were about precisely the subject, I thought um, it would be okay to ask for it back. But the answer was no, um, and my account would be deleted. But I'm still here. I guess it's a matter of time. I see there's one person watching. Hello, hello. Thank you for watching. I have some news for you. So I hope you are also subscribed to my blogs, Voice of Reason and A Radicalized Rabbi, to um, be updated about my latest thing if you're not already my Facebook friend. Obviously, my cancellation on on YouTube. Well, the thing is, I'm in a twilight zone. I can't. I've been told that it's like being told you're dead when you're still alive, and you think, oh, well, that's not very good. But I'm still, going about doing my business. But yes, I suppose it's a bit like a dead man walking. Anyway, where there's a will, there's a way. And where is this way I wish to tread on to go where? Obviously, um, I still want to do the thing that I want to do. I want secular Quranism to be adopted. I, by the Western ruling classes. Um, and of course, the question is, why would they do that? Why would they do as I ask? Because it is
You want me?
for the best. So many distractions. So, what was I saying? I was saying that um, I haven't been fobbed off by from my objective. Oh, I was going to say no. Imposing is not quite the word. I I actually should read to you Okay, the two things I wanted to read to you, but maybe there isn't, because I did mention it some time ago, and you should go to my secular Quranism link tree to know where to find me. If you're not already my Facebook friend or in communication with me, on Telegram or Facebook, Gab, the others. Just find me on Linktree. So I don't want to go through reading the disappointing email from YouTube telling me that my account is going to be deleted. My latest news is that obviously I'm going to spread out my activities. It is not. It isn't really necessary for me to have a YouTube channel, really, as long as I get my ideas platformed on YouTube channels bigger than mine, with a potentially big audience. With a potentially bigger audience, and also the numbers game is not really the most perfect measure of one's success. You could, be talking to a million non-player characters when you could be talking to just one person who is honourable and influential and can get things done. Hello, Dafiq. Are you subscribed to all my channels? I should put my Linktree link here, because people just often aren't really paying attention. So here is my Linktree link, and you can keep in touch, assuming my accounts on, this or that and whatever are deleted, and you can find me using other means. That they can't be deleting all of my accounts all at the same time. So what is my latest thing? My latest thing is my Twitter Spaces with Curious Gazelle that I've timestamped on Voice of Reason and The Radicalized Rabbi. And you may be interested to hear these conversations, because it's with a woman, not just any woman, but a Muslim woman who has spoken to, wait for it, Luke Ford. So she was the one who spoke to Luke first. So she's properly stalked me. I think the object of her interest is really me, not Luke. But there you are. We must accept her methods of investigative journalism. And she is investigating me, and I should be grateful, because, well, I've always wanted to be investigated by journalists. In fact, I was nearly going to be on The Guardian by this investigative journalist until she couldn't get CIA clearance, or her editor couldn't get CIA clearance to report a story about me. So despite the interest of my Facebook friend, who drew her attention to my to secular Quranism, and she really wanted to do the story, and she asked me preliminary questions which I answered as well as I could, and then she still couldn't get the go ahead to do it, and that was the end of the matter. And then I got that message, that email from YouTube telling me that my account had been removed, because I was just such a terrible person, interfering with the democratic processes, with my 1.4K little YouTube account. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, they threw the book at me. I mean, it's obviously one of those catch-all emails saying you're going to, get your account removed from YouTube if you do these things, and implying that you've done all those things, and then they won't they would even tell you which video of yours did the wrong thing. So anyway, here it is. I'll give you the link. Oh yeah, so you do know who I am on Twitter, my username. So I've just put a link in to my latest one, the one saying, yes, you've appealed against your account removal, and we're not going to we're not going to reinstate your account. I suppose while I'm about it, I could give you the original letter telling me why they're going to remove my account. And it was way back in May, the 3rd of May, in fact. I can't remember what I said now, but here it is. I mean, okay, this is just past history. It's not very interesting. I wanted to tell you about my latest my last two conversations with Curious Gazelle. So she's Muslim, she's British, she's spoken to Luke Ford. Yes. So I've got it here. This is the first interview, which you can have a look at. What do you mean, the freak 7 years ago, and it would have been all over you? Well, what do you mean by that? I don't understand. I suppose I have to get used to people saying things to me that I don't really understand. I wish they wouldn't, but then even when I say this, I know I sound like my English teacher. Yeah, you say Luke Ford. I don't know what you want to ask. What you want to ask about Luke Ford? I'm saying that Curious Gazelle spoke to Luke Ford, and the title of it was Luke Ford speaks to posh British lady. That was her. So you can find her conversation with Luke on Luke's channel if that's what you want to do. But I have embedded it in my post. In the conversation between Curious Gazelle and me when she informed me of that, and that would be her interviewing me on my Twitter space. Okay, I still don't understand what you mean. The magazine publisher that decided to publish your story. No. Okay, I mean, I think that there's some kind of learning disability or mental illness that people can't express themselves clearly in their own language. keep asking. I mean, I awesome for clarification, and it doesn't come. I don't know what you mean. It's very disappointing, a little annoying. But anyway, I hope that what I say is reasonably clear. I'm saying that I do seem to be having a streaming partner, and she's female and Muslim and a graduate, and just not some retard unable to understand my ideas, even though she has a certain tendency to deliberately misunderstand my ideas. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because if she does misunderstand my ideas, I can always clarify the situation. Okay, Tafriq, I'm saying what I said about the CIA is in the context of a Guardian journalist saying she would do a story about me because her attention had been brought to secular Quranism through a Facebook contact of mine, Facebook friend, in fact, even though he's not that friendly. And so she wanted to do a story, and she did ask preliminary questions, which I answered, and it looked like she wanted to do the story, but was told by her sub editor that they didn't want to do the story after all, for policy reasons. All right, and I interpret that to mean that her editor couldn't get CIA clearance. Is that now understood? So I don't know why you talked about 7 years ago. I don't know what you mean. Right. So you're saying that 7 years ago you would have been shocked and surprised that the CIA was taking had such total control of global media, but now you're not. That's what you're saying, isn't it? All right, now I understand. But anyway, my Facebook friend is he's such a boomer. He refuses to understand. He's saying, "Oh, prove to me that global media is controlled by the CIA." I mean, it's common knowledge now, isn't it? And then I mean, of course, I can't prove it other than to link him to articles, um, to web pages with people saying that. And there's even a Wikipedia entry about CIA. And let me see that there's an actual CIA influence on public opinion. So, I mean, it's so well known as to be a Wikipedia entry. And still, this boomer Facebook friend of mine refuses to acknowledge it. But then he's a boomer, calls himself a liberal Democrat, and he's, predictably Islamophobic, and he's just swallowed hook, line, and sinker everything that mainstream media has pushed down his throat, and he's happy with it. Because I suppose for many people, they want to be mainstream, and to be mainstream is to be with the majority. To be with the majority is to mock and sneer at the minority. So there are obviously reasons that people who don't really believe in something pretend to believe in it in order to be on what they think is the winner's side. He's atheist, actually, but one of those Jewish atheists, totally assimilated. Well, I'm really pleased that I can still be streaming on this channel with you. I didn't think it was possible, but now you become technically more knowledgeable and adept at I suppose, doing things that you're not officially supposed to do, um, finding ways, means of getting your way. Right. So have I given you all the links that I wanted to give to you? Because I'm talking, so I've done it all. Yes, I've done it all. So I hope you listen to my 2 exchanges with Curious Gazelle, that whom you can find on Twitter. She's already clashed with John Vance, who has said a number of rude things about her. Oh, thank you for saying that. The freak, thank you for saying that it's stupid that people would do something to hinder my channel and expression. Because I'm unstoppable, aren't I? Haha, they shouldn't even bother. They should just, well, let me say what I want to say and then, formulate their arguments against my proposals. Thank you to Freak for taking such an interest. I think it's the people who are really interested who will go out of their way to listen carefully and read between the lines. And there's so many lines to read between. So I am optimistic because I'm always optimistic when I meet a woman prepared to talk to me, because it is really, really key to the battle of the sexes. So we already know that feminism is a lie. It's a lie because there's just so many women who are not interested in talking about politics, and they'll get really upset if you challenge them or disagree with them, and they think you're evil for hurting their feelings and shit like that. And that is how they behave. So really, gender is not a social construct. Or maybe that's a wrong word. Sex is not a social construct, meaning, okay, let me just try and explain it from the beginning. So it is this, with this statement, gender is a social construct. So it means that our gender roles are dictated by societal rules, and with the implication that we needn't follow them. But then, if you look a bit deeper, you will have to ask yourselves, why? Why were gender roles created? And why did people not question the social obligation to perform our gender roles? And I'm saying it is because once upon a time, when the West was a patriarchy, it was accepted that people would marry if they could. If they could find somebody prepared to marry them, then they would marry and then they would have children, and that was the way to be. And that was for centuries the commonly assumed assumption, commonly assumed practice. No, what was it? Yes, it was the it was an institution, and by institution I mean the practice of people who wanted any kind of status in the world to have children. And the idea was that not everybody could have children. You should have to jump through the hoop of marriage and prove to the world that you are at least able to find somebody of the opposite sex, not within the forbidden degrees of consanguinity, to marry you and agree to have children with you, who is not past, who is capable of bearing children or siring children. And that was the hoop that marriage made people jump through if they wanted to have sex and children. And it was a filter, and a eugenic filter. And because of feminism, all these rules have been dismantled until now there is the presumption that there is nothing special in getting married. It's an optional extra, and it's an expensive optional extra. And if you do it, people will just hate you, really, because you now have prime ministers who don't even do that sort of thing. Jacinda Ardern and Boris Johnson. And I'm saying that's a problem. That is precisely the problem of Western civilization, the degeneracy caused by the lack of the practice of marriage. And I'm saying the only way to regenerate such a degenerate society is to restore the patriarchy, and the only way to restore the patriarchy is to forbid and punish extramarital sex. And I know this subject bores you all, but because you're mostly men who are unmarriageable and have no interest or prospect of becoming married fathers. So you're not interested, and I understand the scope of the problem. Yes, Tafreed says lots of arranged marriages in the past too. Yes, because marriageable people would have married parents who would want their children to be considered marriageable and would want to marry their children off, and they would introduce each other. They would want to be introduced if there was somebody from their kind of background who is also single and looking, and these would be done discreetly. There would be parties, and and people of the same class would meet each other and then marry each other, and that's how these things worked. But now our society, Western society, has become very porous. So nobody, it's because of liberalism. Let's just face it. Liberalism is the idea that everybody is equal of the other, and you already know it's illogical. It's illogical to think in this way, in the same way that it is illogical to deny against all evidence that men and women regard the same situation in a different light. And a good example would be immigration. I mean, men immediately feel threatened by immigration because there would be all these foreign men. I mean, they wouldn't even think, oh, there are all these lovely foreign women for us to marry, because they would think that they would prefer to marry women of their own race, and they wouldn't, want to marry foreign women. Well, and so this is this explains the saying of men are endogamous while women are exogamous. So this just means that men prefer to marry women of their own race, and women are more prepared to marry foreign men, or they're more likely to find them to be exotic and attractive for this reason. So I don't know how true this is, because basically, most people do not have a queue of suitors. so that they can say, oh, I want the tall one instead of the short one. I want the light one instead of the dark one. I want the rich one instead of the poor one. I want the smart one instead of the stupid one. It's just like, well, really, how many people could we say were prepared to marry us? And it's not a long list. And even Hollywood stars like what's her name, Jennifer Aniston, um, didn't didn't stay married. Did she even get married? I think she did, but she's single, and so it's kind of sad. I think she was briefly married to um, Brad Pitt, wasn't it? Okay, I mean she's looking good at 54. She was married twice, Justin Theroux and Brad Pitt. But don't think that just because you're a Hollywood star, you're going to have a wonderful marriage or great children. There's no guarantee, so there's no need to envy the rich and famous. The Freak says, "What are you actually witnessing, Claire? That the judgments of Ezekiel 16, 19, and 23. I really emphasize that you read those, and I think it will put some puzzle pieces together for you. And as it happens, I have a Bible next to me, and I will read them now. Okay? That will please you, I know. Okay, Ezekiel 16. An allegory of unfaithful Jerusalem. Yes, number 16. I'm just reading out the chapter headings. 19, a lament for Israel's princes. It's quite a lot to read, so I'm not going to read it now, after all. And 23 is two adulterous sisters. Well, I suppose you can easily deduce that if you disobey God's laws, bad things are going to happen. So it doesn't surprise me, and my thesis is that Judaism is actually too hard for Jews to follow, and they should have realized it when so many bad things happened to them, and then God revealed the Quran, and they should have seized it with both hands and thought, great, we don't have to do all the hard graft of Judaism anymore. We can be Muslims. But they didn't. They didn't do that. They thought, we prefer to have a higher status to Gentiles by by being a member of God's chosen people, and some of us can even get away with calling ourselves Jews without being observant Jews. And if you can have the best of both worlds, why not do it? And so quite a few of them did, with the result that they got punished, and they still don't get it. So don't think Jews are that smart. They're not. I mean, it's pretty stupid when you are cursed by God and you don't even notice. You don't even know that you've been cursed by God, and you go every year at Tisha B'Av. What day is it this year? So Tisha B'Av 2023 is from from the evening of Wednesday, 26th July to Thursday, the 27th of July. That's when they culminate their yearly. It's not a festival; it's the time of commemoration of Jewish tragedies, which makes them religiously obliged to ask themselves, "Oh why? Oh why? Oh why?" You know, does God hate us? Why? Oh why do we suffer? Why? Oh why do we keep getting punished? It's that yearly lament, and it's like, yes, you've got you can't obey you can't obey the Torah because it's too hard. You have the option of the Quran, but you disdain it because you think it's for peasants and Gentiles. Obviously, when Gentiles were being mean to Jews, they couldn't assimilate. And when Gentiles were being accommodating and they assimilated, that is also wrong. And God continues to curse them. And also, yes, he also curses Christians, and Christians are even dumber than Jews because they don't they don't know, or they haven't noticed that they've been cursed by God too. I mean, look at what's happening in America and all of the West, and they think, oh, we're in good standing with God. Why, oh, why do we suffer? I mean, come on, they're really dumb. Everybody's really dumb. I mean, what do they really believe in God or not? Because you can tell. You can tell just by what a person says whether they really believe or they're just pretending to believe. A lot of people, as I said at the beginning, pretend to believe in stuff in order not to have to argue about it, not to identify themselves with dissidents and minorities and persecuted minorities. And they want to stay mainstream, so they go with the mainstream opinion. And this includes the political orthodoxy, whatever it may be. Currently, it's liberalism, which is obviously going awry. So I'm saying, obviously, there's something wrong. So it's something to do with your politics and your religion, and and since I've been investigating this problem of Westerners not being happy with their government, the British in particular complaining about immigration and being a member of the EU and leaving the EU and still being unhappy and complaining about immigration and their government still doing all it can to facilitate immigration despite having left the EU. And then they realised that they only left the EU because they thought leaving the EU would mean less immigration, but not a bit of it. I mean, they should have realised really that all these other Western countries complaining about immigration, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, are not in the EU, are they? Not in the EU, and they still complain about immigration. And then when you think of the world's number one superpower and all the Trump voting Americans whinging about immigration and having their election stolen, it's obviously nothing to do with the EU. Or it could be that, okay, the EU is basically following the orders of Uncle Sam. That's the only way to explain it, isn't it? So, in a way, it makes sense. Like, well, if the EU is one political entity, then there should be freedom of movement because people in one part of the country should be able to move to another part of the country. But actually, that's not true if you think of feudalism, because the whole idea of feudalism is that if you're born on a piece of land that is owned by the baron, you can't just sort of decide you want to go and seek your fortune elsewhere. you just wouldn't be allowed because your labor is needed to, till the land and whatever, be an agricultural worker and all that, because the countryside needs to be populated, and if not, everybody would just go to the cities. Now, we also know from great empires like China, like Russia, and even Austria, because I remember a reference in Mein Kampf by Hitler saying that, oh, and I just arrived in Germany and I've just registered. And you think, registered? Whatever for? And obviously, even back in the olden days, 19th century, 20th century, people weren't just allowed to just move about willy-nilly. And if you even go back to American history and look up the case of this is my favorite case, really. It's the one about whether America is a Christian nation. And it's already it was already a piece of legislation called the Alien Contract Labor Law, an act of Congress passed in 1885 prohibiting the importation and migration of foreigners and aliens under contract or agreement to perform labor or service of any kind in the United States, its territories, and the District of Columbia. This was in 1885. So this case was about the Church of the Holy Trinity having imported an Anglican priest, and then somebody well, it came to the notice of the government and saying, "Oi, you can't be importing your importation of this Anglican priest has come into conflict with the Alien Contract Labor Law." So all way back in 1885, there were already, all these rules about who may come to America. Okay, background. The late 19th century in American history marked a period of expanding industrialization and national security concerns. In the North, manufacturing was growing at an unprecedented rate, while the South took over the textile industry. The United States was feeling a virtually never-ending demand for cheap labor. The process of industrialization and urbanization was a main attraction for immigrants to the US. The Contract Labor Law of 1864 established a policy of encouraging immigration by supporting companies who would provide passage to their workers in exchange for labor. The law was soon repealed, but demonstrates a national support of what was called, at the time, a flood of immigrants. So Americans have been complaining about floods of immigrants ever since the founding of the American Republic. And they didn't really care what race they were because, obviously at the time they were white people. An Anglican priest was obviously a white person and a Christian person, and they were still making trouble for him. Let me continue. In the 1880s, immigration from South, Central, and Eastern Europe rose dramatically, and immigrant populations from this region became more influential in American public policy. A once welcomed group, the Chinese, became the target of restrictive immigration policy, including the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. With the dramatically increasing numbers of all immigrants, but most specifically a reaction to Chinese coolie labor in the US, a new concern came before Congress: the influence that immigrant labor had on the labor market and the native worker. As wages were driven down, contract labor became a rallying point for anti-immigration sentiment. My goodness, you Americans. So, so all this whinging and moaning about immigration, it's nothing new, is it? Okay, the law. The first version of the Alien Contract Labour Act of February 26, 1865 was written in comprehensive terms and stated in its first section. Now I'm going to go and get myself more water. It shall be unlawful for any person, company, partnership, or corporation in any manner whatsoever to prepay the transportation or in any way assist or encourage the importation or migration of any alien or aliens, any foreigner or foreigners into the United States, its territories, or the District of Columbia under contract or agreement, parole, or special express or implied made previous to the importation of migration of such alien or aliens, foreigner or foreigners, to perform labor or service of any kind in the United States, its territories, or the District of Columbia. The second section of the law voided all contracts and or agreements if made prior to immigration. The next two sections provided penalties, including a fine of $1,000 for employers who knowingly bring a contract laborer into the country. Fifth section provides an outline of exemptions from the Act. They are 1. Foreigners temporarily in the United States and engaging other foreigners as secretaries, servants, or domestics. 2. Skilled laborers, provided that such laborers cannot be obtained in the U.S. 3. Professional actors, artists, lecturers, or singers, or persons employed strictly as a personal or domestic servants. Finally, exempt was 4. Assistance by a resident of a member of his family or a personal friend to come for the purpose of settlement. Amendment. Is this interesting for you? It is for me. Have it? Okay, it's gone back to. Yes, the freak says, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Okay, so he also says the UK was funding more than 25% of the entire EU GDP. Hello, Luke Croft. Just talking about immigration in early America. I mean, I just don't know why, documentaries haven't been made about it already. Anyway, I seem to be the only one doing it. All right, so amendment. February 7, 1887, the O'Neill Bill was passed, which amended the contract labour law of 1885. It added 3 major sections to the original act. The problem was largely that, although the laws were sweeping in its prohibition against labour contracts, it was virtually impossible to enforce. The new section charged the Secretary of the Treasury with enforcement of the Act, gave him power to establish needful rules and regulations, and provided that prohibited persons were to be sent back on arrival. Go back to where you come. Why don't you go back to where you came from? Now, those of you who are paying attention would know that all these Americans, they were part of what would now be called human trafficking, right? So basically, these mostly Irish people, yes, mostly Irish people who were suffering from the Irish potato famine, moved on over to America. Do you think that they would have, lots of money, after paying for their, food bills? Or were they already completely wiped out? And then they thought, well, what shall I do? What shall we do? We better go somewhere else because there's no future for us here. So that's what they did. But obviously they didn't have the money, the fare to cross the Atlantic, to make the Atlantic crossing. I don't know how much it was, but it was obviously more than, any starving Irish peasant could afford. So what they did was they sold themselves into indentured servitude, which is basically, well, we haven't got any money, but we'll work for you for X number of years if you get us across to America. And that was how Europeans got there. It wasn't because they all had, the fare for their cruise ship ready. They didn't have the money, and they sold themselves into indentured servitude, which is another name for slavery. Now, this is a very useful idea for white people to have, particularly to be used against black people who accuse you of slavery. If you could only have thought about it yourselves. But I don't know why you can't think of these arguments yourselves, or you just, maybe you don't want to argue with black people who want to blame me for slavery, when you yourselves have been enslaved, but using a different terminology. Actually, I should have used this on the Odyssey channel, but it doesn't matter. I was just, going to start this stream telling you about my latest thing, and now it's led to a lecture on the alien contract labor law. All right, there's one final heading that I want to read to you. Discrimination in the law. Not only was the contract labor law largely a response to Chinese coolie labor, but it explicitly had exemptions written into the law that demonstrated occupational preference. That is, the exemptions did not restrict the movement of workers who had a skilled trade or one that did not fall into the union movement that was happening at the time, but they excluded professional actors, artists, lecturers, or singers, not to persons employed as strictly personal or domestic servants. A later act amended the 1885 Act by adding ministers of any religious denomination, persons belonging to any recognized profession, and professors for college and seminaries to the occupational classes exempt from the contract labor law. Now, isn't this act so clear about there always being a problem with managing the balance of power between capital and labor? It was a problem that the Chinese didn't solve it. Well, the Chinese have problems, but I'm talking about the Romans, because when you think of the entire history of mankind, it's always how to manage labor relations. So you think you can cheat people by, you think you can, what's the word? Get around the laws of paying your workers what they think they're entitled to by importing cheap foreign labor. And obviously this would be resisted by well, the urban proletariat. And for a long-term solution, what you have to do is to keep the domestic supply of labour adequate. And if you don't do that, then obviously the demand for more willing foreign labour will become irresistible, and that is what has happened over the decades. I mean, that's it's just so ridiculous. You want to blame Jews, you want to hate Muslims, and it's like you didn't manage it. Your government didn't manage it, and your anti-immigration parties wouldn't be honest with you, because the only way any honest anti-immigration political leader could say, if they were being honest, they would have to say, you're not having enough. You're not having enough babies, and you're not educating or training them properly, and that is what is causing the demand for foreign labour. It's as simple as that. But these dishonourable men who complain about immigration, they keep wanting to blame the Jews, and then they keep being hit on the head by legislation saying they mustn't blame the Jews. But they keep it, and the more they get punished, the more they want to blame the Jews, whether or not it is true that Jews are to blame or not. So it's just people being stupid. But listen, no conspiracy theory is required to explain human stupidity, right? Yes, Pseudo Freak gets it. No, I'm not going to put any WD-40. Actually, I tried, but it doesn't work. It doesn't get into the right. And I think it's kind of trademark. It's a trademark noise. Now, so what I'm saying is that I can explain all your problems without using conspiracy theories, which is pretty smart of me, isn't it? I don't need to hate on the Muslims. I don't need to blame Jews. I won't get into trouble. But yes, I did start this stream complaining about how YouTube don't want me around. So I must be annoying somebody, and I'm thinking it must be the feminists, it must be the matriarchy who don't like what I'm saying. They don't want to be made to have enough children. They don't want to be made to marry before they're allowed to have children. And they don't want to talk about any of these things, and that's why they want to shut me down. Not because I'm such an evil person. So I'm saying labour relations need to be managed better, as well as gender relations. And I have all the solutions, but I'm not being allowed to propagate them, when really I should be platformed on mainstream media and secular Quranism be given saturation coverage until you are all secular Quranists. So before I go, I will summarize what I thought I said. Incidentally, if you listen to any of Curious Gazelle's streams, you'll find that they are less. They're more formless than mine. I like to give people a takeaway point. I like to summarize what I've just said, if I can remember it, and I want you to go to my link tree so you'll know where to find me at any time in case I'm deplatformed on these other platforms. B, I want you to take note that I'm talking to Curious Gazelle, who is Muslim and female, and that makes her doubly special. And we'll be talking about gender relations. And I promise to do my best to broker a marriage for her. So lots to talk about in the matter of dating, sex, and marriage, which will that should be of interest to people who are not particularly interested in politics. And and I just want to remind you that even though I've lost my primary channel, but you can still find my streams on Odyssey. So you should go there and subscribe to me. Odyssey seems to be a decent enough community. It's much better now. So I urge you all to support it and to keep in touch and to watch for the latest development. All right, I don't understand your question. That's the ones on Twitter. I don't know what you're referring to. But yes, I'm mostly on Twitter. Yes, I'm also on Truth Social. And I have no followers on Truth Social, which is a bit sad. Have I mentioned that I'm on Truth Social on my Linktree? No, I haven't. I'm on Getter. I am. Oh yes, my book. Would you like to buy my book? Buy my book. Okay, I'll mention that I'm on Truth Social on my Linktree, and off I go. Thank you all for listening, and speak to you before too long.